Jacob Thornton came looking for shelter from the storm. He found a trembling child covered in dirt and terror. When she opened her mouth, he expected screams. Instead came a whisper so powerful it rebuilt everything he thought was destroyed. "I love you." The autumn wind carried dust across the empty plains as Samuel Harrow rode into what remained of Willow Creek. His horse, a tired chestnut mare named Copper, snorted at the desolation that greeted them. The town had been abandoned for months, maybe longer. Windows stared like hollow eyes from weathered buildings, and tumbleweeds rolled down the main street like ghosts of the people who once walked there. Samuel was 53 years old, his beard more gray than brown now, his hands rough from decades of working cattle and mending fences. He had been riding for 6 days, heading nowhere in particular, running from memories that seemed to follow him no matter how far he traveled. 3 years ago, he had buried his wife Martha beneath the old oak tree on their homestead. 2 years ago, fever had taken his only son Thomas, barely 20 years old with his whole life ahead of him. Since then, Samuel had sold the ranch, given away most of his possessions, and taken to wandering. There was nothing left for him to build, nothing left for him to protect. He was just a man waiting for his time to end, filling the days with endless riding and the nights with restless dreams. He guided Copper toward the livery stable at the edge of town, hoping to find shelter from the coming storm. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising rain before nightfall. The stable doors hung crooked on rusted hinges, creaking in the wind like old bones complaining of the cold. "Easy, girl," Samuel murmured, dismounting and leading Copper inside. The barn smelled of old hay and abandonment. Dust motes floated in the shafts of gray light that penetrated through gaps in the wooden walls. Samuel found a relatively dry stall and began unsaddling his horse, his movements slow and mechanical, the routine of 1,000 similar nights. Then he heard it, a small sound, barely audible above the wind, a whimper like a wounded animal might make. Samuel's hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip as he turned, scanning the shadows of the barn. "Who's there?" he called, his voice rough from days of silence. No answer came, just another small sound, this time from the back corner where hay bales were stacked against the wall. Samuel approached cautiously, his boots crunching on the scattered straw. He rounded the hay bales and stopped cold. A little girl sat huddled in the corner, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face buried against them. She wore a dress that might once have been blue, but was now so covered in dirt that its original color was just a guess. Her hair was tangled and matted, and she was shaking, whether from cold or fear Samuel could not tell. "Lord have mercy," he breathed, holstering his weapon and kneeling down slowly so as not to frighten her further. "Little one, can you hear me?" The girl lifted her head, and Samuel felt his heart crack like old leather. Her eyes were huge in her thin face, brown as chestnuts and filled with a fear that no child should ever know. She could not have been more than 6 or 7 years old. "Please," she whispered, her voice so small he had to lean closer to hear. "Please don't hurt me." "I ain't gonna hurt you, child," Samuel said, keeping his voice gentle, the way he used to speak to spooked horses. "My name's Samuel. What's yours?" The girl stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for something. Whatever she was looking for, she must have found it, because some of the tension left her small shoulders. "Lily," she said. "My name's Lily." "That's a beautiful name," Samuel said. "Lily, where are your folks? Where's your mama and papa?" At those words, tears spilled down the girl's dirty cheeks, leaving tracks like tiny rivers through the grime. She shook her head, unable or unwilling to speak. Samuel felt something stir in his chest, something he thought had died along with everyone he had ever cared about. Without thinking, he shrugged off his worn coat and held it out to her. "Here now," he said. "You must be freezing. Why don't you put this on and we'll figure out what to do?" Lily hesitated, then reached out with trembling hands and took the coat. It swallowed her whole when she wrapped it around herself, but she clutched it tight like a lifeline. The storm broke outside, rain hammering against the barn roof like 1,000 tiny fists. Thunder rolled across the plains, and Lily flinched at each crack. Samuel settled himself on a hay bale near her, keeping enough distance that she would not feel threatened, but close enough that she would know she was not alone. "You been here by yourself?" he asked quietly. Lily nodded. "For a long time, I don't know how long. The sun has come up lots of times." Samuel's jaw tightened. Days, maybe weeks. This child had survived alone in an abandoned town. How she had found food and water, how she had stayed alive, was beyond his understanding. "What happened to the town?" he asked. "Where did everyone go?" "They left," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "When the sickness came. Mama said we would leave too, but then she got sick. Papa stayed to take care of her. He told me to hide in the barn if anyone came. He said to stay hidden until he came for me." She paused, and her lower lip trembled. "He never came." Samuel closed his eyes against the wave of grief that washed over him. He knew that story. He knew it in his bones and in his blood. The sickness had taken his son the same way, swift and merciless, leaving nothing but empty spaces where loved ones used to be. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said, and the words felt wholly inadequate, but they were all he had. "I'm so very sorry." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain. Samuel found some dried beef in his saddlebag and offered it to the girl. She ate ravenously, and he realized she must not have had a proper meal in days. He gave her his canteen, and she drank until he gently pulled it away, worried she would make herself sick. "Mr. Samuel," Lily said when she had finished eating, "are you going to leave too?" The question hit him harder than he expected. He looked at this small, fragile creature, alone in the world just as he was, and something shifted inside him. For 3 years he had been running from loss, convinced that caring for anything or anyone would only lead to more pain. But looking into Lily's frightened eyes, he saw himself reflected back, and he understood something he had been too consumed by grief to see before. Running from pain meant running from everything, including the possibility of healing, including the possibility of purpose. "No," he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "I ain't going anywhere." That night, Samuel made a proper camp in the barn. He started a small fire in an old metal bucket, careful to keep it away from the hay, and laid out his bedroll for Lily. She protested weakly, but exhaustion won out, and soon she was curled up beneath his blanket, his coat still wrapped around her. Samuel sat with his back against a wooden post, watching the fire's flickering light play across the child's sleeping face. She looked peaceful now, the fear temporarily smoothed away by dreams. He hoped her dreams were kind. As the night deepened, Lily began to stir. She whimpered in her sleep, caught in some nightmare that Samuel could not fight for her. He moved closer, unsure what to do, unpracticed in the art of comforting children. Martha had always been the one their son ran to when darkness scared him. Lily's eyes flew open, wild with terror. She sat up, gasping, looking around frantically until her gaze found Samuel. "You're safe," he said quickly. "You're safe, Lily. I'm here." She stared at him, her chest heaving with rapid breaths. Then, without warning, she launched herself at him, wrapping her thin arms around his neck and burying her face against his shoulder. Samuel froze, uncertain, his arms hanging awkwardly at his sides. And then Lily whispered something that changed everything. "I love you," she breathed against his shirt, so quiet he almost missed it. "Please don't leave me. I love you." Samuel felt tears spring to his eyes, the first tears he had shed since burying his son. His arms came up slowly, carefully, and wrapped around the trembling child. He held her the way he used to hold Thomas when the boy was small and afraid of thunderstorms. He held her the way he wished someone had held him when he stood alone at 2 graves with nothing but emptiness ahead. "I ain't leaving you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise you, Lily, I ain't ever leaving you." They stayed that way until Lily's breathing steadied and she fell back asleep in his arms. Samuel did not move, did not try to lay her down. He simply held her through the night, a guardian against the darkness, a protector when she had no one else. When morning came, the storm had passed. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the barn walls, painting everything in gold. Lily woke slowly, lifting her head from Samuel's chest and blinking in the brightness. "Morning," Samuel said, his voice gentle. "Morning," she replied. Then her eyes widened with worry. "You're still here. I told you I would be..." A smile broke across her face like sunrise over the mountains, and Samuel felt his heart swell in a way he thought it never would again. They spent the next few days in Willow Creek, Samuel teaching Lily how to care for copper, how to find clean water, how to recognize which plants were safe to eat. He discovered that despite everything she had been through, she was bright and curious, asking questions about everything and remembering every answer. She also had a remarkable capacity for joy. She laughed at Copper's antics, delighted in the wildflowers that grew near the abandoned church, and found wonder in the simple act of watching clouds drift across the sky. Her resilience amazed Samuel and shamed him a little too. He had spent years drowning in grief while this child, who had lost just as much, still found reasons to smile. On the fourth day, Samuel made a decision. "Lily," he said, kneeling down to her level, "I know I ain't your papa, and I ain't trying to take his place. But I was thinking maybe you might want to come with me. We could find a proper town, get you some new clothes, maybe find a place to settle down." Lily's eyes went wide. "You mean live with you? Like a family?" "Something like that," Samuel said. "If you want. But families love each other," Lily said, her voice small. "Do you love me, Mr. Samuel?" Samuel thought about the question. He thought about the way his chest ached when she cried, the way his heart lifted when she laughed. He thought about how he had watched over her sleep for 4 nights, about how the thought of leaving her behind felt like contemplating cutting off his own arm. "Yes," he said, and the word came easier than he expected. "I reckon I do." Lily threw her arms around him again, and this time Samuel did not hesitate to embrace her back. They stood there in the morning light, 2 broken people finding wholeness in each other, 2 lonely souls discovering they did not have to be alone. A week later, they rode into the town of Cedar Falls. Samuel with his worn clothes and graying beard, Lily perched in front of him on Copper's back, wearing a new dress Samuel had traded his pocket watch to buy. They found a boarding house willing to rent them a room, and Samuel found work at the local livery stable. It was not much, but it was a start. Months passed, and Samuel discovered something he thought he had lost forever: purpose. He woke each morning with a reason to face the day. He worked hard so Lily could have shoes without holes and books to read, and a warm bed to sleep in. He enrolled her in the local school and walked her there every morning, picking her up every afternoon. The townspeople were curious at first about the gruff old cowboy and the little girl he claimed as his own, but Lily had a way of winning hearts, and soon the whole town had adopted them both. The baker slipped Lily extra cookies when Samuel brought her in for bread. The school teacher stayed after class to help her catch up on lessons she had missed. The preacher's wife invited them to Sunday dinners and fussed over Lily like a grandmother. Samuel found himself changing too. He smiled more, spoke more, engaged with the world he had been trying to escape. He made friends with the other men at the livery. He joined a weekly card game at the general store. He even started going to church, not out of sudden religious conviction, but because Lily loved the singing, and he loved watching her joy. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the small cabin Samuel had saved enough to rent, Lily looked up at him with those big brown eyes. "Papa Samuel," she said, using the name she had given him, "remember when you found me in that barn?" "I remember," he said. "I was so scared," she continued. "I thought I was going to be alone forever. And then you came." She leaned against his arm, her head resting on his shoulder. "You saved me." Samuel put his arm around her, pulling her close. "No, little one," he said quietly, "you saved me." And it was true. In that abandoned barn, searching for nothing but shelter from a storm, Samuel had found something he never expected. He had found a reason to keep living, a heart to protect, a love he thought he would never feel again. Lily had whispered those words in the darkness of a stormy night, words she desperately needed someone to hear. But in speaking them, she had unknowingly given Samuel exactly what he needed too. A second chance, a family, a home. The sun set over Cedar Falls, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Samuel watched it with Lily by his side, and for the first time in years, he did not dread the coming night. He did not fear the dreams or the memories or the loneliness, because he was no longer alone, and neither was she. They had found each other in the wreckage of their separate sorrows, two souls brought together by fate, or providence, or simple chance. And in finding each other, they had discovered something beautiful. They had discovered that love, even when it whispers, can heal the deepest wounds. That family is not just about blood, but about choice. And that sometimes the best things in life come not from searching, but from simply being willing to open your heart when the moment arrives. Samuel Harrow had ridden into Willow Creek expecting nothing. He rode out with everything that mattered.